Welcome to the Edge of NFT with your hosts, Jeff Kelly, Ethan Janney, and Josh Krieger, the podcast that brings you the top 1% of NFTs today and what will stand the test of time. We explore the nuts and bolts of the business side and also the human element of how NFTs are changing the way we interact with the things we love. This podcast is for the dreamers, disruptors, and doers who are pumped about this ecosystem and driving where it goes next. Join us as we delve into the fascinating world of AI and Web3 and entertainment with our guest, John Attanasio from Toonstar. This is a special episode, I should mention, as we are live in Venice, California at Kin with the studio audience. Let's hear the audience. And alongside with our friends at Startup Coil and our great studio audience of curious technology aficionados who made this conversation possible. So let's meet John, the co-founder and CEO of Toonstar, a next-generation animation network designed for the mobile age. John is an alumnus of University of Southern California, Marshall School of Business. Any other USCs in the house? Couple? Cool. And Toonstar is a Web3 animation studio at the forefront of interactive storytelling and community experiences. They are the creative minds behind the Gimmicks, amazing project, an innovative community-driven animation NFT project that empowers creators and fans with creative control and commercial benefits. Let's give it up for John.
Hi, hello.
All right, so normally
Good
Ethan
afternoon.
does that.
Good afternoon, Venice, California.
Good afternoon. So normally Ethan does the intro. That was probably my first time in my life doing the intro. How'd I do?
Excellent. I thought it was really good.
All right.
Yeah.
Ethan, look out, man.
I think you have a future in this.
Maybe. 250 something episodes so far. Let's keep going. Yep. So look, Toonstar is pretty amazing. It's creating a new world of possibility for creators, and I just love to kick it off and engage folks with sort of the genesis of it all.
Yes. So how far back should I go to, like, childhood? We'll go to childhood.
I mean,
we'll start there.
If it matters.
Okay. If it's relevant. Yeah, I mean, so Toonstar, the best way to describe us is we call ourselves a Web3 story studio. I'm one of the founders. The other founder, her name's Luisa Huang, and we both come from the studio world. So we met at Warner Brothers. Before that, I was at DreamWorks, and she was at Disney. So we spent a long time in the studio world. We always say, better or worse, there's some good parts, or some things that we think need some challenges. And basically came up with the idea for Toonstar. There were a couple things, like we were in the digital media group was our last role, and we were doing a lot of experimentation at the intersection of technology and storytelling. We were involved with a group. I don't know how many people remember Maker Studios. It was one of the original sort of OG MCNs. So we were on the team that was sort of trying to figure out how to take the relationship with Maker Studios and integrate that into the broader studio. And it was a great experience, a lot of learnings, and I think what it did is it really kind of opened our eyes to this idea of the creator economy, and this notion that creators can connect with fans directly. There was this really, sort of interesting type of storytelling that was taking place. And I think that was sort of the first aha moment for us. Is wow, this whole idea of direct to community, direct to consumer is fundamentally changing in a lot of ways thanks to technology. And then the other part of it is being in the studio system, we had a chance to work on a lot of animated properties. Fortunately, and I'm a spoiler alert, I'm Gen X, so I'm a child of Saturday morning cartoons. My brother's a comic book artist, so I grew up going to Comic-Con before, Comic-Con became what it is today. And we just, it's always animation has always been a amazing storytelling medium to myself and my co-founder. It's such a great way to build characters and character worlds, and it's also a great commercial medium. When you look at some of the most successful IP properties, they are animated properties. And so it was always odd to us that when you looked at the animation ecosystem, it was very much like a private club, and it was the same people on rinse and repeat, whether it was writers, showrunners, voice talent. And that was always a head scratcher, because to us it's like, wow, this is such a great storytelling medium. Why don't more people have access to it?
Do they all live in the valley too?
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. They're from everywhere. But I think that was the moment where it's like, listen, like there's so many creative voices out there. There's so many diverse voices out there that aren't getting a chance to tell their stories in animation. And you sort of put those two things together, and that was the inspiration for launching Toonstar. And I think the idea at the beginning was like, what would Disney, DreamWorks, look like today, given sort of the tools, technologies, and sort of what's happening with creators and communities. And that's, enter Toonstar.
Great. And I think because you're smaller, I think that it comes with some nimbleness and agility to try some new things, right? And along those lines, you guys have really been pioneers in the AI front. We just came from an event at UTA talking about AI, and I understand you've been doing a lot of speaking lately on the topic, given how newsworthy it is and how important it is in terms of where things are going. I'd like to sort of dive into how you're using AI specifically, because I think these broader conversations are exciting, but let's get specific and really understand the use cases of this and how it applies to the entertainment industry, which we're all part of in some shape or form if we live in LA or we turn on TV or our phones, right? So let's start with the production side of the house. And in AI, what have you done with AI? What's been your sort of AI journey with production?
Yeah, and so so on the production side, and our company, we've been around for about 7-ish years. And when we launched the company, the idea is that we really were focused on this notion of like, okay, if you're going to build characters and tell stories direct to communities, and when we started, our focus was on social media, and if you're going to do it on those kind of platforms, you're going to need to come up with a completely different like production process, and also build a new kind of like animation technology. And so that's exactly what we did. So we built an animation tech stack that allows us to do high quality animation very quickly. It's analogous to like a gaming engine. So there are other types of technologies out there that do a similar type of thing. But really what it's doing is it's automating a lot of the sort of like labor intensive processes of animation. So whether that's like lip syncing, facial expressions, certain movements, that's what and in this case, we're using machine learning, which is a type of AI. That's what it's doing. And it's very effective. And we've had a lot of success with that, primarily because one, we're able to produce first and foremost a quality product, but two, it gives us this speed. And this is, sort of one of our kind of like thesis, is that to go direct to community and direct to consumer, you need to be able to produce at a speed that they're accustomed to, right? So if you think about social media, everyone, I see people with phones, like you're on it every 5 minutes sometimes, certainly every hour. So you're on there and there's a cadence that you expect, and that's what you're looking for in terms of content and conversations. So our belief is that you need to be able to produce somewhere in that area if you want to have success on social media. So that is, that's how we're, the tech stack is machine learning that's helping us do this production. But I think the real benefit is the speed, the quality and the speed. And then what that does, it allows you to have these really unique interactions with the audience, because all of a sudden now, you're creating characters that live in social media, and you can have these conversations near time, almost real time, but there's a heavy cadence to it. And now all of a sudden you have a deeper connection to the characters, the content. Also the content becomes more relatable, because what you can do is you can drop in timely topical things. Like we do a lot of pop culture type narratives, and so we can take something that's trending and all of a sudden drop that into the storyline. Now all of a sudden it feels more relevant and relatable. And again, all those things, the goal is to deepen the connection with the audience and that character. And so that's, I think that's a interesting, sort of use on the one use on the production side. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it seems like a critical part of the puzzle that was missing otherwise to create a type of animated content that is very relatable to the current attention span of today's consumer.
Right.
So what's the time savings there, if you could quantify it, having, you're an OG in the world of animation, relative to where we were before?
Yeah, I mean, so if you look at and again, this is like there's a spectrum of how long it can take to do animated content, but traditionally, animated content, if you look at a series that is on a network, right, those can take up to 18 months to produce, sometimes up to 2 years to produce. Now, there's obviously a variation on that, but that's that's what you're looking at in terms of like something you might see on network TV. We're doing episodes in a week, and this is like a fun fact, and this is sort of some of the stuff we were doing prior to Web3. We've got the largest animated channel on Snap Discover, and the thing that actually gets is sort of like I think underappreciated about Snap is that the audience we get actually is bigger than what you would see on a network TV, and I think a lot of people don't either know that or don't sort of give it the credit that it probably should get. But that sort of that is like that's I think a really a key way to leverage it.
I'm doing the math in my head. I think it's at least like 60 to 80 times faster than where you are. I mean, that's pretty incredible.
Well, yeah, I was going to say, like, I was trying to do the math too, and that's faster than I was doing. But to sort of break it down, it's like we can do a 5 to 8 minute episode in a few days. So that gives you a sense of how quickly you can do it. Now, you bump that up against a network episode. Generally, those run about 22 minutes. But you can, that's about the speed that we can do. And interestingly, the thing that actually sort of slows it down a bit is less on the production side. It's more on the creative development side, which is the story writing and sort of storytelling part of it.
So this crazy flashback came to my mind that I probably am not supposed to share out loud, but with the old election with Obama, there in the Gangnam Style trend, I had this idea to make a Gangnam Style Obama video go viral, and I ran out of time, and someone else did it because it took too long for my animator to do his magic.
Right.
But if I had the technology you had, I would have beat College Humor to the punch.
That's right. Exactly. Yes, you could have. Yeah, you could have been right.
I could have been relevant
Totally.
And had that viral video.
You could have, totally.
So that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So, but you're also messing around on other sides with the characters too, right?
Yeah. So that's one use case, and again, like on the production side, we've been using that for years. And you mentioned, so our first project in Web3 was a project called The Gimmicks. We co-produced it with Mila Kunis, and it was actually the first weekly community-driven animated series in Web3. We had a lot of success with that. Community's been great. We just launched our third Web3 series in a year. 2 weeks ago, it's called Space Junk. Space Junk stars John Heder, stars Tony Cavallero from Righteous Gemstones. And it's created by, his name's Dominic Russo. Dominic Russo is the creator of Workaholics. So you've got this, crazy, talented, team behind Space Junk. Creatively, which I could talk about, I don't know how much time we have, but creatively the concept's awesome. It's about like the unsung heroes that are garbage men and women in lower Earth orbit. So it's a very, we call it.
Could be all of us after AI.
Exactly, I know, that could be where we're heading, exactly. But it's, we call it a workspace comedy. So creatively, biased, but we think it's very, very funny. But the AI part of it is we actually have the first AI voiced character in an animated series that's in Space Junk. Which was, it's certainly got a lot of attention. And, for us, we thought it was appropriate because it's AI voicing a robot. So it's a robot voicing a robot. And we thought there was something kind of like inherently, funny about that. But the cool part about it is like when you hear the voice, and this is kind of like a part of the creative process, is as we were doing the voice, it actually sounded too human for us at the beginning, and we're like, well, wait, we need to make this sound more like a robot. So we actually made it sound more like a robot because part of the idea and the character, the character arc of Welbecca is that she's a robot, but as she hangs out with this crew, she starts to sound and sort of act more human over time. So it's by design. So we had to sort of back it up and say, okay, let's go more robotic, and then over time she's going to start to sound more human. All that's done through AI.
And I feel like the humans are going to be more robotic if they spend too much time with her too, right?
Right. Yeah, they might start sounding more robotic.
Very cool.
Yeah.
And you didn't stop there in terms of your use of AI, because you've also applied it to social, which I think is one of the more interesting use cases. I was talking to someone before I was going to interview you, and they're like, "Yeah, I haven't heard about that."
Yeah.
And it seems so relevant in terms of how is AI going to integrate into the social experience of learning about content and being engaged and being part of a community. So I'd love to hear about those use cases.
Yeah. So, and that's another use case we got into with Space Junk. And so the idea was first and again, okay, how can we use AI in new and different ways, just, beyond the production side? And so we're like, oh, this is cool. We have a character named Welbecca who's actually voiced by AI. What if we take her and actually make her the creative co-pilot for the community? So then we're like, okay, this could be a really great use case for character generation, for story generation, because part of the projects we do, the core theme to our projects are they're community driven. They're community driven storytelling. It's community driven on-chain experiences, but it's all about the community, and the community drives it. And so for us, it's like, well, gee, why can't we take AI, put the AI in the hands of the community, and let them use it like ChatGPT, let them use it like DALL-E and Midjourney, and help them create their own characters, help them create their own backstories, and sort of go, but all within the Space Junk canon. And so what we did is we have a character, Welbecca, who is just that. And if you're a token holder in Space Junk, you get to go to her, and she's going to help you write your backstory for your character. She'll also then help you take your backstory and then turn that into a visual representation of your character. And then she'll help you turn that into a comic panel, and then turn it into an animated short. And so that all is being powered by AI, in cooperation with the user, the community member, and they're working together to create this cool thing within the Space Junk canon.
And I would wager that the opportunity to co-create that experience is as valuable to the community as the output that they create.
Yeah, and I think that's what really we've noticed. So we have an A/B test, and the A/B test is for the gimmicks. We used AI on the production side for the gimmicks, but we didn't use AI on the community facing side. And what we did for the gimmicks is we allowed the community to do the same thing. Like they could write backstories, and if your backstory, and I can't make this up, but we created a social layer. We were told it was the first social layer in Web3. And it's called the Dick Punch, and this is where it's NSFW, sort of, I guess.
So is our podcast, so you're
cool.
fine.
So okay, I'm
this
never sure.
This audience is mature. They signed their waiver.
You see, everyone seems mature. But we spell it differently. So it's DIC, which stands for Decentralized Inclusive Community. So it's very thematic to the ethos of Web3. But the cool part about it was a social layer. So it was our version of the Facebook poke. And what it allowed the community to do is, if someone goes in there and you write your backstory, in this case, there was no you weren't being helped by AI. You just go write your backstory. If the community thought your backstory was the coolest, they'd give you the most dick punches, and then you'd actually get to voice your character as a cameo in an episode, which now all of a sudden becomes really cool because you get IMDb credit in a Mila Kunis produced animated series. And the community absolutely loved it, and all of a sudden now your character comes to life, you get to voice it, and you show up in the series. And so, but the first version of that was we didn't use AI, so it was a very manual process, you did it yourself. For Space Junk, now we're using AI as, again, you're sort of creative co-pilot. The amount of output and the conversion has gone 10x. And so what that's told us is yes, it really helps, to your question. There are some creatives that don't want help, don't need it, and they're great with a blank sheet of paper. But I think there are a lot of aspiring creatives and people that want to tell stories that could use some help. Maybe you want some structure. Maybe you just want some ideas to riff off. And I think when you sort of look at some of the greatest storytellers of all time, they'll tell you some of their work is derivative. Tarantino worked in a I think it was a Blockbuster. Is that accurate? I think it was a movie rental. But he notoriously is someone that has, watched so many movies, and they clearly have influenced his storytelling. So I think, there are a lot of people that can use sort of help in certain ways to still have the essence that they want to be part of the output, but just a little bit of like, help along the way.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of interesting from the perspective of, how people think about disabilities or impairments today versus 10 years ago. And I feel like we all have blockers in our lives where we're better at some things than others. And yet, if we didn't have those blockers, why not create a story? Why not do something outside your comfort zone? And essentially, you're enabling the community to accelerate getting uncomfortable.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the other thing we found too is like it's always helpful. Like prompts are very helpful because we've done again like a lot of A/B testing, and again like we're always trying to figure out ways to like have our community participate in the narrative, like whether they're creating characters or help drive where the narrative is going to go and story arcs go. And prompts are always more effective because it's a starting point and it's something you can riff off and it's something that you maybe, and you can sort of move from there. And I think that's just it. It's like the aid of that prompt versus like just complete blank.
So you built up your own stack, but are there tools and technologies that you recommend to folks that they can use that you've messed around with and that the audience can actually take with them and sort of mess around with at home?
Yeah, I mean, so we built to your point, we built our own tech stack, but I would say if you want to experiment with AI, like, go play with ChatGPT. Like that is, there's a lot you can do with it. Play with Midjourney, play with Dolly. If you, ChatGPT, if you want to, produce, text. If you want to produce images, Dolly and Midjourney are great. And just experiment with it because really what happens, and I think Copilot is a good way to see this. It's like an assistant, it's a Copilot, but essentially you're in the director's chair, and the more you play with it and the more you give it sort of a command and you give it a certain prompt and you see how it reacts, the more you're going to get comfortable with it, and you're just going to learn, and it's going to learn you because actually it will start to figure the things the way you think, and it's going to start to give you things where you're like, oh yeah, this is better, and it's getting better because it's actually figuring out what you're trying to ask it. So I think there's just get in and play with those tools, and once you're in there, it's like, wow, like they're really, really, really powerful.
Cool. Well, speaking of powerful tools, this is Edge of NFT, and I think we at least have to go down the Web3 rabbit hole a little bit because blockchain has not exactly been fully embraced by the entertainment industry yet. We've had Fox on the show. I don't know if you all know, Fox has done some blockchain work with a new sort of studio, BCL, and Warner Brothers has dabbled in it. But you've really embraced blockchain for Toonstar based on what you learned, from SonarCast and whatnot. Yeah. I'd love to sort of understand what you see as the strongest utility for animation and blockchain and the type of community that you're building. Yeah,
I mean, I think, I think the biggest, sort of, positive use case is that it's about ownership. And I think this idea of, you come in and you actually have ownership in what we're all building together, and you actually have a stake in it. So if you come in, and the project becomes the next South Park, becomes the next Simpsons, and you play a role in that happening, you actually have some skin in that upside. So I think that is one of the sort of big promise of it. I think the other promise is just the nature of being decentralized, and this idea that if and we've done work in Web 2 prior to Web 3, and now we're like deep in Web 3. And I think one of the challenges of Web 2 has been that because it's centralized, this idea of like, hey, I build up a community, I build up fans, and then the algorithm can change overnight, and all of a sudden now my fans go away, or I reach 5% of my community because the algorithm changed. And I think that lack of control is an issue in Web 2, and I think Web 3 and the blockchain can help solve that. And I think the last thing from a creator, because I think these benefits depend on whether you're a creator, storyteller, or whether you're a fan. And I think the other benefit on the creator standpoint, and I think this is what we're trying to build, is that when you look at the traditional studio system, it is very much that's a gatekeeper economy. And I don't know how many people here are, have tried to sell a show to a streamer. You've tried to get something made. It is very difficult. It's become increasingly difficult. Even if you have had success, getting something sold is very hard. And then it's about, can you even get it made? So there are challenges, clearly, everybody has seen now, in that sort of traditional gatekeeping system. And I think what Web3 provides is this new possibility of like, oh, wow, actually, I can go get something made. I can reach an audience directly, and I can control it, I can own it, and hopefully through that, we're going to have new stories and characters that weren't getting made in the traditional system.
So I think a lot of Web3 folks have sort of gone through that hopium experience where they had this full vision of unlimited possibility, but reality has hit, and there's been use cases that have worked and use cases that haven't worked in a more sort of precise way. I'm curious for you all, what did you try with blockchain that worked really well, and what did you try that didn't work and you had to sort of adjust course?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I mean, so I'll say this: the stuff that worked really well was, the community-driven storytelling, like inviting the community into the canon. And again, when we launch these projects, it's like we're not launching projects that are a PFP and then from there let's go build out. And no, that's a way to do it. That's not how we've done it. But there are projects where it's like, here's a picture, and then we're all going to buy an NFT, and then we're going to take these pictures and then turn it into something. Our approach has been, we're going to have a canon. We're going to have, these very talented, at least as a starting point, writer, voice talent attached to these projects. We're going to launch it, and that's going to be almost a prompt for the entire community. And then we're going to let everybody come in, use that as a starting point, and then help figure out where we take this thing, where the characters go, where the first season goes, what new characters, spin-offs. I mean, gimmicks, I think, is a good example. The second season fully came from the community. So we did the first season, and it was like gimmicks is like best way to describe it. It's like South Park meets WWE. And then what happened is we had a character called Chico the Luchador, and in that first season, through the wikis, everybody, and it's sort of like those mind map, like a Sherlock Holmes mind map where you see, the strings and they all point to one character. That's what we saw happening with Chico the Luchador. It's like everybody was writing about how their character was like related to him, or a friend or foe or whatever, but it all went back to Chico, and we're like, there's something there. So we took all that essentially fan fiction. That is the second season. So second season of the gimmicks was called House of Chico. It was the first all Latino animated series in Web3, and it came from the community. So to me, that I think is a great success, because look, we let the community participate, and they helped us come up with the second season, which was another hit. And I think the social layer probably is the other part of it, like this idea that we had a social layer where people, again, with the, it's funny, but it's on theme, like the dick punch, where you can get social cred, you can vote with that, you can send each other DMs. And I think that social layer is so important because it brings, and I think it all probably comes back to utility. And it's like our projects have this kind of utility about co-creation in the community. So I think that's the sort of the biggest positive. I didn't get to the, but go ahead, yeah.
No, I think you covered both, right?
Okay, the challenge, but I think that's, no, I did.
Yeah. You covered both.
Yeah.
I think at the same time that this is all, quote, a giant experiment, you've really been a pioneer here. And I find what you've done at this intersection of AI and blockchain and entertainment remarkable. And, I'm really excited to see where you go next with that. I also think there's an element of controversy in terms of what you're into. If like this whole room was full of your community, everyone would be like cheering right now. But we're in the middle of a writer's strike, and I just saw a story a few hours ago that the Actors Guild is thinking of joining the team. If there are a bunch of writers in the audience right now, I think they would be a little bit intimidated by this idea of the potential of crowdsourcing, content, and then potentially having, your audience turn into your actors too, I guess in some extent, especially with animation. I'm sure you have a lot of friends that are writers, and you've thought about this a lot, and you certainly are embracing technology. I just wanted to get your perspective on the writer's strike and what we can expect as an outcome here, in coming months.
Yeah, that's a big question. There's a lot to unpack, but I mean, so on the first part of it is the embracing. So how creatives and writers can embrace community involvement. I think we have, again, with our projects, two great use cases. So I'll take the gimmicks, and this is what I enjoy about our projects is these are live. This is not theoretical. It's not conceptual. These are live case studies, and they're out there right now. And so for our first project, it was written by David Wright and Dave Eilenfeld. They wrote for Family Guy and Star Trek Lower Decks. So they were the guys that did the gimmicks. Now, talented, successful writers, they came in and they embraced this idea of, hey, we're going to let the community come in and play with the story, play with the characters. And I'll tell you, it's a balance. And I think it is a mindset that I think, people, and if, there's a top-down philosophy, there's a bottom-up, and there's something where I think that you do both. We're not, I think studios traditionally have been top down where it's like, here's the thing and it goes out and we're not going to let the community play with it, touch it, do fan fiction. I know there's some outliers, but generally that's kind of the approach. There's the other approach of where it's going to be 100% bottom up, where it's like the community is going to drive everything. Our approach is a combination of the two, where we start kind of top down, we bring the community in bottom up, and we let it sort of interact together. And I think, it's something where, creative storytellers, and honestly, I think it is something where you need to get used to, because the thing I would say is that younger audiences, and I don't know if I said, but spoiler, like I'm Gen X, right? So, I don't fall in the, Z and Y class. But younger audiences, and I think it still even applies to my generation to a certain extent, are now are accustomed to active engagement, and you don't need to look anything further than social media, and that's how we've been trained. It's like, I want to engage in some way, whether it's a like, share, follow, that's one level, or whether it's I want to get in and co-create and add to the narrative, I want to create my, my own stories. That is how younger generations, and I call it active engagement. That is what I think, is the future. And I think, to me, my advice is just be like, get comfortable with that notion, because I think there's a lot of success and potential to be had there. And the other thing I'd say is it doesn't mean that you have to give up your creative vision, because again, Space Junk, Dominic Russo, he's the creator of Workaholics. That's it's a very well-known, successful series. He's done the same thing. And, these guys are the quarterbacks. And I think, one of them, I think it was David Wright, had this like great example of like, as the creative quarterback, it's like going to the airport. Like, where the airport is, but guess what? There are a lot of different ways to get to the airport. And so I think as long as you have a strong creative vision that's driving, hey, I know I'm going to get to the airport, but there are all these sort of different ways I can get there, and there are like detours and things, and there's some like great detours to take, and you can learn something from those things. And so I think being comfortable with that notion, but still saying, hey, I'm going to take the vision here, but being open to that kind of, interaction, is I think it's we biased, but I think that's key to success.
Cool. I want to give this very engaged audience a chance to ask some questions, but I have one more. So if you're out there, think about what your question is, and we'll definitely try to get to it. What are other nascent technologies you're exploring, and how does like the Apple announcement that just kind of went down make you think about your industry a little bit differently?
Yeah. That's a good question. I mean, so, as far as other nascent, and we started talking about AI, but the other thing, I'd say AI is like, and so AI is polarizing. There's no doubt. I've been places where I've been lauded for talking about AI, and I've been places where I've been assaulted, not physically, but digitally assaulted for things of,
Dick butts.
about AI and what we believe. But I think AI to me is a transformative technology. It is, I think and the comparison I use is the printing press, right? So there's a lot of conversation around AI, taking everybody's job and replacing human beings. To me, that is, that's an extreme, very extreme narrative. And you actually rewind, and this is interesting. The printing press was, invented in 15th century. So you're looking at 600 years ago. An interesting narrative. 600 years ago, people were talking about machines taking their jobs, a la the printing press. And now you fast forward, what happened with the printing press? Well, actually, more jobs were created than replaced. More industries were created than replaced. And a lot of people would actually attribute the printing press to the Renaissance. So that's history has said that. So I think this idea of we have new technologies and they're going to open up new ways of stories. They're going to open up opportunities for new storytellers. I think that is the big, to me, sort of big promise. So short answer, I would say AI is and sorry, the Apple question you had around the Vision Pro. I don't know. That's to me, Apple has been transformative in my life. Like you talk about, I think it was Steve Jobs was saying about, they're talking about, they went from personal computing to mobile computing, now to spatial computing. And I know the first two were transformative for me because personal computing, when I got my first word processor, changed my life. And again, I'm Gen X, but I'll never forget that feeling of oh my God, now I have a word processor to do these kind of things.
I mean, immediately when I think of Toonstar, I think about using this headset to be your character, interacting with other characters, interacting with the actual characters in the show, and actually participating in a live version eventually of the making of the next episode.
Yeah, no, I mean, and I think there's and I think they're very. I think again,
no.
I mean, and I think the potential of it. I get, the point I was going to make about Apple is to me personally, I'm biased, but I wouldn't bet against Apple because I've seen what they've done with those future iterations, and I do think this is probably the thing that gets us closest to that. And again, it's version 1, but
it's expensive and it's big, but it could lead to many things, just like the first computers, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think there are a lot of, and I think Bob Iger made an appearance, and there's no coincidence, he made an appearance at the conversation, they were having about the Vision Pro, and I think, the reason is yes, there are a lot of applications to what you can do with entertainment. So exciting, in theory.
Cool. Does anyone in the audience have a burning question? See a few hands raised. I don't know if we have other mics. Here you go.
Okay. First off, this is really fascinating because at the advent of the writer's strike, because they're losing royalties, perpetuity, and with the advent of blockchain technology, that can change, bring it back, but more for decentralized people that might not know that they're writers, but as they participate, they become writers. So my question is, does your production company have the infrastructure right now to pay out the users, and how is that infrastructure?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, and I think that use case you just said, that's a great use case for the blockchain, and that's what it's intended to do. So short answer is yes, we have that infrastructure. So we not only have a production tech stack, but we now over the last 2+ years built Web3 tech stack. And basically what that is we're building on these blockchains. So we've done projects our first project was on Solana, second project was on Avalanche. We just launched Space Chunk is on Theta. We're going to do our next project later this year is on another chain. So we're building on all these different blockchains. And to your question, it's yes, those blockchains are the things that record exactly what you're saying. And so I think that's where there is promise with the combination of when you think about what you can do with AI and the blockchain, or just creation, right? We have somebody in our community that creates a story and they create a backstory that actually is now on blockchain. And so there's provenance to the story they created. They own that. So now all of a sudden there's a record of that. And then if that monetizes, that's theirs. They own that. If that potentially ends up, in as part of another story, there is a scenario where you can get, royalties on what they've created, and all that stuff is being recorded and tracked on chain. Same thing I think eventually can happen with if you think about like using AI for voice performance, or you use AI to like basically write a story, those models have to be trained by people. If you opt in to train a model and part of whatever you contributed becomes part of the output, now there's a scenario where you can actually get paid on wherever that goes, because you had part of basically creating that final product. So it's almost like it is like an idea of like royalties, but it's like perpetual royalties. And then there's an interesting, not to go too far on this tangent, but we were at this thing, and it was, Will.i.am was just talking about this.
I understand.
Sorry. Siri.
Your AI is working
AI,
overtime.
My AI
Yeah.
just jumped in, but
I love how
Will.i.am.
you just slipped it in. They
Yeah.
were just, like in a room with Will.i.am, which
I know.
is a fact. And I saw him the previous day too. He is making his rounds.
Yeah, and totally. And I think the interesting thing he talked about was this idea of essence. And you as a creator, what is your essence? And in music, there is a whole idea of like Prince, Michael Jackson. They have an essence, and their essence is influencing other songs that are actually going to get generated. So is there a way to take that essence, and even though like maybe you're a living artist, but maybe you're not a living artist, but it doesn't matter, if you have that essence and people want to use it and mix it and turn it into something else, then you should probably get paid for that. And it potentially could become like a passive income. So these are all sort of like use cases that are kind of out there that are again like futuristic a little bit, but I would say not that futuristic.
No, check out FYI.ai. That's Will's new company that he's very passionate about and doing a lot in. I think it's very relevant to where we're at right now. I think there was another question. We have time for one more. All right. Everyone, yeah, sure.
So I'm curious if you could make a bet. You mentioned you have a character that is a voice of AI. When do you think, if you could give me a guess on what year, you will have two characters voiced by AI, written by AI, having dialogue with each other?
Okay, two characters having written by each other, having dialogue with each other, dating each other's brothers, sisters, all that stuff.
Yeah. So what year? And so I'll say I'll qualify that by saying whether it's us or somebody. I actually don't think that's too far off. I think that's something you see. I think you potentially could see that. That's a problem with predictions. They're always wrong. But I would say you could see that in a year, definitely. In fact, I think there's a. We were talking about that earlier. I think there's a dating app where you can create it's like a Tinder or a Bumble, and you can create a digital version of yourself.
Yeah, I just saw it demoed last night at a happy hour.
Yeah, and so then the digital version of yourself can go hang out with someone else's digital version of themselves, and then they decide whether they like each other or not. And then if they do, then you can decide to meet in real life. But there's this interaction happening in the digital world that's, in theory, I guess is supposed to make it more efficient. I prefer to have that pain myself. That's you lose something in the. But that's
it's all worth it, right?
Yeah,
all that pain when you finally do meet the right one.
Right.
But and then you don't have as many stories to tell your friends about the wrong ones either.
Right.
This has been really amazing. I learned a lot. I'm so appreciative of your time, John. Where can folks go to learn more about Toonstar and find you on the web?
Yeah, so if you want to find our work, so we're on the web, so it's toonstar.com, and you can check out our company there. Also, we love, if you want to check out our projects, the first project it's called therealgimmicks.com, so you can go there. And then Space Junk is on spacejunkies.xyz. But the best way to just Google gimmicks and Google Space Junk, and that'll get you to the websites. And you can go in there, and the content is not token gated, so you can watch the content, you can watch the episodes. And then if you want to get in and vote, if you want to. Now we're up to a cosmic dick punch, so if you're in Space Junk, you want to cosmic dick punch somebody, or you want to create your own character, your own backstories, or even get an opportunity to have a cameo in an episode, then you can purchase one of the NFTs and become part of the community. So
that is a call to action if I've ever heard one. Okay, we've reached the outer limit at the Edge of NFTs for today. Thanks for exploring with us. We've got space for more adventures on the Starship. So invite your friends and recruit some cool strangers that'll make this journey also much better. Go to Spotify or iTunes, rate us right now and say something awesome. Then go to edgeofnft.com to dive further down the rabbit hole. Look us up on all major social platforms by typing Edge of NFT with no spaces and start a fun conversation with us online. Lastly, be sure to tune in next time for more great NFT content. Thanks again for sharing this time with us today.
Thank you. That was awesome.
All right.
Thank you.